The morning began with a silence so heavy it felt like it could crush a man's chest, and as the cold wind swept across the cemetery, Daniel Carter realized that grief does not fade with time, it only learns how to hide. He stood before his father's grave, hands trembling slightly, his breath forming pale clouds in the air, wondering why life always seemed to take the strongest people first and leave the broken ones behind to figure out how to survive. He had come here seeking a moment of peace. But what waited for him among the rows of gray stone would unravel everything he thought he knew about his past, his pain, and his future. Before the story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet miracles that can change a life when least expected, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps stories like this alive. Daniel was a single father in his mid-30s, worn down by responsibility and grief in equal measure. His wife had passed away years earlier, leaving him alone to raise their young son while juggling long hours at a modest job that barely paid the bills. His father had been his last pillar of strength, the one man who never judged him for struggling, who never made him feel small for being tired. When his father died, Daniel felt as though the ground beneath his life had cracked open, swallowing whatever stability he had left. Visiting the grave had become a ritual, not because it healed him, but because it reminded him that love once existed, even if it was gone now. That morning, as Daniel adjusted the wilted flowers he had brought, he sensed movement behind him. Cemeteries were rarely empty, but something about the presence felt intentional, almost purposeful. When he turned, he saw a woman standing several feet away, dressed simply, her posture calm yet heavy with emotion. She was not crying, not visibly distraught, but her eyes were fixed on his father's headstone with an intensity that unsettled him. Daniel felt a surge of confusion mixed with irritation, as though this private moment was being intruded upon by a stranger who did not belong there. The woman did not approach him immediately. She remained still, as if giving him space, as if she understood grief well enough to respect its boundaries. The wind tugged at her coat, and strands of her dark hair framed a face that carried both strength and sadness. Daniel noticed how her hands were clasped tightly together, as though she was holding onto something invisible. Time stretched in uncomfortable silence, and Daniel's heart began to pound for reasons he could not explain. Finally, the woman took a few slow steps forward, stopping beside the grave. She lowered her gaze, and in that quiet moment, Daniel sensed that she was not there by accident. Something in her presence felt connected to him, to his father, to a chapter of life that had been sealed shut. He felt an urge to leave, to escape before old wounds were reopened, but his feet remained rooted to the ground. The woman's name was Grace Miller, though Daniel would learn that later. What struck him first was the weight she carried, a grief that mirrored his own but came from a different place. She placed a small object near the headstone, something Daniel could not immediately recognize, and the simple gesture sent a sharp wave of emotion through him. His father had been a private man, someone who rarely spoke about his past, and seeing a stranger honor his memory ignited a storm of unanswered questions. Grace's presence forced Daniel to confront the truth he had been avoiding for years, that he never truly knew his father as a whole person. His father had been kind, dependable, and quiet, but there were parts of his life he never shared, sacrifices he never explained. Standing there, watching Grace mourn in her own silent way, Daniel realized that love leaves fingerprints everywhere, even in places we do not expect. As the minutes passed, Grace finally turned toward Daniel, her expression filled with a careful mix of hesitation and resolve. She seemed to be measuring her words before letting them exist, as though once spoken, they could not be taken back. Daniel felt a tightening in his chest, the instinctive fear that comes before life changes in ways we cannot control. Grace revealed that she had known his father many years ago, long before Daniel had built his own life, before responsibilities and losses hardened him. She explained that his father had once helped her during the darkest period of her life, when she had nothing but fear and regret. He had given her kindness without expecting anything in return, and in doing so, he had altered the course of her existence. Grace had carried the debt of gratitude for decades, unsure if she would ever find the courage to face the past. What Grace shared next shattered the fragile emotional armor Daniel had built around himself. She explained that his father had supported her through a crisis that forced her to make an impossible choice, one that left her with lifelong guilt and unanswered questions. He had protected her secret, not out of obligation, but out of compassion, believing that mercy mattered more than judgment. Daniel felt the ground tilt beneath him as he realized that his father's life had been far more complex, far more generous than he had ever imagined. As Grace spoke, Daniel began to see his father through a new lens, not just as a parent, but as a man who quietly carried the burdens of others. He felt pride surge through his grief, a bittersweet understanding that the love his father had given so freely was still echoing through the lives he had touched. At the same time, Daniel felt a deep ache for the years he could never reclaim, the conversations that would never happen. Grace's revelation did not end there. She explained that she had spent years searching for Daniel, not to disrupt his life, but to offer him something she believed he deserved. His father had once helped her rebuild from nothing, and she had gone on to create a stable, meaningful life because of that kindness. She felt it was her responsibility to ensure that his legacy did not end in silence or struggle. Daniel's emotions collided inside him, grief mixing with disbelief, hope clashing with suspicion. He had learned to survive by expecting nothing from the world, by assuming that life would only take, never give. Yet here was a stranger standing at his father's grave, offering proof that goodness could ripple forward in ways that defied logic. In the days that followed that meeting, Daniel found himself unable to return to his old routines. Grace's words lingered in his thoughts, reshaping his understanding of his father and himself. He began to recognize patterns in his own life, moments when he had chosen kindness without realizing where that instinct came from. For the first time since his wife's passing, Daniel felt a spark of purpose beyond mere survival. Grace did not attempt to insert herself forcefully into his life. Instead, she offered support with quiet consistency, helping Daniel see opportunities he had been too exhausted to notice. She encouraged him to believe that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but an extension of the love his father had always embodied. Slowly, Daniel allowed himself to accept that his life did not have to be defined by loss alone. As months passed, Daniel's world began to change in small but meaningful ways. He found better stability, renewed confidence as a father, and a deeper connection to the memory of the man who had raised him. His son, sensing the shift, smiled more often, laughed more freely, and reminded Daniel that healing does not erase pain, it grows around it. Just before the ending of this story, take a moment to comment below and share what kindness means to you, because your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. Standing once again at his father's grave, Daniel felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest, not sorrow but gratitude. Grace stood beside him, no longer a mystery but a living testament to the power of compassion. Daniel understood then that his father had never truly left him. He had simply continued working through others, shaping lives in ways that transcended time and death. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even the smallest act of kindness can echo across generations, please like this video, share it, and let us know your thoughts. Your engagement helps keep stories of hope alive, and sometimes hope is exactly what the world needs most.